Picture this. A king hands over like 180 of his favorite palace concubines to a philosopher,
Right.
and he just says, turn them into an army.
Which sounds completely insane.
It does. You might think this is just some brutal ancient legend or something, but it's actually the foundational story of the most influential strategic text in human history.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because 30 minutes later, the two favorite concubines are literally beheaded on the parade ground, and the rest of them, they're marching with this absolute terrifying precision.
Just flawless execution.
Exactly. Usually when we talk about a 2,500-year-old historical text on this deep dive, I think there's this expectation for you, the listener, of like dusty philosophy.
Right, like reading a museum exhibit. You look at it, nod respectfully, and say, ah, how quaint.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But then you step into the actual mechanics of ancient Chinese military strategy, and that glass just completely shatters.
Well, it shatters because the underlying mechanisms of human psychology they haven't changed at all. I mean, the text we are looking at today was written between 505 and 496 BC.
Which is incredibly old.
Oh, yeah. During China's really tumultuous spring and autumn period. It was written by a military general from the state of Qi named Sun Tzu, or Sun Wu.
Right.
And to put that timeline in perspective for you, this book was setting down the ultimate laws of warfare centuries before the first Roman legionary was ever even seen on the Danube.
Wow. Centuries before Rome.
Yeah. And its incredible legacy lies in the fact that it remains, perfectly relevant today. The rules of human conflict, ambition, and psychological leverage, they're identical. Only the battlefields have changed.
And to really understand the book, we have to look at the psychology of the man who wrote it. So let's go back to that story of the 180 concubines, which is actually recorded by the ancient scholar Sima Qian.
Right, the ultimate test.
Yeah. So King Holu of the Wu state, he's read Sun Tzu's 13 chapters, and he wants to test him. He basically asks, can your theories on managing soldiers be applied to literally anyone, even women of the court?
And Sun Tzu just calmly says yes.
He does. So the king brings out his palace ladies. Sun Tzu divides them into two companies and puts the king's two absolute favorite concubines in charge as the commanders.
The ones the king is most attached to.
Exactly. He gives them spears, explains the basic commands like front, back, left, right, and asks if they understand. They say yes.
Right.
He beats the drum and orders a right turn, and the women just burst out laughing. It's a joke to them.
Well, what is crucial here is Sun Tzu's mechanistic reaction. He doesn't get angry at all.
No emotion.
None. He just analyzes the failure of the system. He states, if words of command are not clear and distinct, if orders are not thoroughly understood, then the general is to blame. He takes total structural accountability.
Right, so he patiently explains the mechanics of the drill again, beats the drum, orders a left turn, again, just fits of laughter.
But this time, the equation changes.
Yes. This time, Sun Tzu shifts the systemic blame. He says, if the orders are clear and the soldiers still disobey, then it is the fault of their officers.
And that's what happens.
Right then and there, he orders the two favorite concubines, the commanders, to be beheaded.
Which naturally sends the king into an absolute panic.
Oh, totally. The king is watching from a pavilion and frantically sends a messenger down, begging Sun Tzu to spare them, arguing that, his food and drink will lose their flavor without these two specific women.
But Sun Tzu doesn't care.
Not even a little. This is where the philosophy just solidifies. Sun Tzu looks at the messenger and says, having once received His Majesty's commission to be the general of his forces, there are certain commands of His Majesty which, acting in that capacity, I am unable to accept.
That is just ice cold.
It is. He executes the two favorites, promotes the next two in line, beats the drum, and suddenly, the remaining 178 women perform every single drill flawlessly, marching, wheeling, kneeling, without making a single sound.
So if we break down the so what of this brutal historical anecdote, it really establishes the book's core premise, right?
Yeah, what do you think that is?
Absolute discipline, crystal clarity of command, and the ruthless necessity of objective execution over emotional preference. The king's emotional attachment was a systemic vulnerability.
I see.
Yeah, Sun Tzu demonstrated that on the battlefield, the structural system must override human sentiment or the system collapses.
It's intense, really intense. But this brings us to the overarching paradox of his entire text. You have this guy who is willing to execute people to enforce absolute discipline, but his ultimate goal, the entire point of the book we are unpacking today, is that the goal is actually not to fight.
Precisely. It sounds backwards, But Sun Tzu writes that supreme excellence is not winning 100 battles. Supreme excellence is breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting at all.
Right, because fighting is expensive.
Exactly. Unnecessary conflict is a failure of strategy. War is a last resort, because war, no matter who wins, inherently destroys resources.
Yeah, it's not an arm wrestling match where the strongest bicep just forces the other down. It's more like a chess game played in the dark.
Intelligence over raw strength.
Right. And he builds this on a few core pillars, preparation, intelligence, discipline, timing, and adaptability.
In governing all of those pillars is the most foundational rule he lays out, which is that all warfare is based on deception.
Deception. Not honor, not lining up in a field at high noon to see who is tougher.
Nope, that's just foolishness to him.
Right. So to truly understand how this works, we need to map out Sun Tzu's exact blueprint. Our mission in this deep dive is to see past the ancient military jargon and extract the timeless science of strategy from his 13 chapters.
It's a perfect roadmap for decision-making.
So let's look at how he actually structures this. If we group the first 3 chapters, laying plans, waging war, and attack by stratagem, it's essentially a masterclass in the economics and preparation of conflict.
Chapter 1, Laying Plans, really argues that war is decided before it begins through calculation.
Yeah, the central idea is predictive calculation. Sun Tzu outlines the 5 constant factors that determine victory: moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, and method and discipline.
And if you understand these 5 variables better than your opponent, you win before the first sword is swung.
So let's translate these mechanisms to the modern world for you. Moral law is basically the structural alignment between a leader and their followers. It's the why. Do the people believe in the mission enough to endure suffering?
Right.
Think about Elon Musk's early days at Tesla. Structurally, the company was a disaster. They were facing bankruptcy, massive production delays, cash flow crises.
It was a mess.
But the employees were driven by this massive shared mission to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. That moral law generated a psychological momentum that kept them working through the night when the financial numbers dictated they should just quit.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
Then there is heaven, which signifies timing and uncontrollable external forces. So weather, seasons, or in a modern sense, the macroeconomic climate.
Like the economy tanking.
Yes, exactly. Think of the 2008 financial crisis. Lehman Brothers collapsed because they ignored heaven. They ignored the shifting environment of the housing bubble and just kept their rigid strategies.
Right.
Conversely, Airbnb thrived during that exact same crisis because they utilized the environment. People suddenly needed extra income to pay their mortgages, so the sharing economy model was introduced at the precise moment heaven demanded it.
That makes perfect sense. And then Earth is the terrain. But, terrain isn't just mud and hills, it's the structural environment of an industry.
How do you mean?
Well, Uber is a fascinating example here. They disrupted the traditional taxi industry's physical terrain. The taxi unions were powerful on the physical streets, right? Holding prime real estate at airports and hotels.
Oh, right, the taxi stands.
Yeah, Uber didn't fight them for that physical space. They changed the Earth to a digital GPS landscape. They forced the taxi industry to fight on a completely new digital terrain where all their old defenses were totally useless.
That's brilliant. So they shifted the battlefield?
Exactly. And next is commander, which stands for the leader's psychological virtues: wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, strictness.
The leader is really the anchor for the entire organization's reality.
Yeah, like when Steve Jobs returned to a near-bankrupt Apple in 1997, his immediate action was injecting clarity. He cut the confusing, sprawling product lines down to a bare minimum. His decisive command provided a psychological anchor that stopped the company's freefall.
And finally, method and discipline, which is organizational structure and logistics.
Right.
Look at Jeff Bezos' day one philosophy at Amazon. That is pure method. It's heavily metric-driven, totally obsessed with logistical processes, ensuring the supply chain is an unstoppable machine.
But, let me push back on this whole concept of laying plans for a second.
Yeah.
In reality, isn't extensive planning just sophisticated guessing? Like, how can you actually calculate an unpredictable future?
That's a really vital distinction to make. Planning, in Sun Tzu's mechanistic view, isn't about perfectly predicting what will happen tomorrow.
Okay, then what is it?
It's about comparative risk assessment. It's about knowing exactly where your structural vulnerabilities are compared to your opponents.
Oh, I see.
Like when Kodak failed to adapt to digital photography, it wasn't because they couldn't guess the future. I mean, they literally invented the first digital camera.
Wait, really? They invented it?
Yes, but their overconfidence in their existing film empire blinded them to the shifts in those 5 factors. They miscalculated their own invulnerability, which left them exposed.
Wow, which flows perfectly into Chapter 2, Waging War. This chapter blew my mind because it's purely about the economics of conflict.
The cost of doing business, basically.
Yeah. The core idea is that prolonged war destroys the victor. He emphasizes that speed is a weapon, and you must forage on the enemy.
Sun Tzu was acutely aware of the immense daily cost of maintaining an army. I mean, if a campaign drags on, the resources of the state will be drained, weapons will dull, and morale will just plummet.
So the mechanism here is resource depletion.
Exactly. You can win every battle, but if it takes 10 years, your country goes bankrupt. Contrast the rapid, decisive 6-day war in 1967 with the dragging, demoralizing nature of the Vietnam War, or the Soviet Union's exhausting campaign in Afghanistan. Long wars drain the victor just as much as the vanquished.
And the business parallels are identical. Look at the fast fashion industry. Zara disrupted the entire apparel market with speed.
Right, they move incredibly fast.
Their mechanism was shortening the supply chain so they could get a design from concept to store shelves in weeks. This drained their slower competitors' market share before those competitors could even react.
Or look at Jio's entry into the Indian telecom market. They started a massive price war, offering free data. But here's the Sun Tzu lesson. If a price war lasts too long, it drains everyone's capital.
Right, it's a race to the bottom.
Yeah, so Jio moved with overwhelming speed to capture the market, knowing they couldn't bleed cash forever.
And as for foraging on the enemy, think about how Google entered the mobile phone space. They didn't spend a decade building a mobile operating system from scratch to fight Apple.
No, they acquired Android.
Exactly. They essentially foraged on existing external resources to enter the battlefield rapidly and cheaply.
Which dictates the logic of Chapter 3. Attack by stratagem. Because if fighting is so expensive, how do you win cheaply?
By disrupting the plan, not the army.
Yes. Sun Tzu explicitly ranks the best strategies. The highest form of generalship is to frustrate the enemy's plans. Next is to break their alliances. Next is to attack their army in the field. And the absolute worst policy is to besiege walled cities.
Right, because laying siege takes months. You exhaust your troops, you drain your treasury, and your soldiers die like swarming ants against a brick wall. Why do that when you can win without a physical fight?
You see this in the geopolitical strategy of the Cold War. The US didn't directly besiege the Soviet Union in a military clash. They broke them economically and ideologically by frustrating their plans and alliances over decades.
In the corporate sphere, attacking alliances rather than the core product is a classic maneuver. Go look at the browser wars of the 1990s.
Oh, Netscape and Microsoft.
Yeah. Netscape was the dominant force. Microsoft didn't just build a better browser and fight them head-to-head in marketing. They bundled Internet Explorer for free with the Windows operating system.
Right, cutting off their distribution.
They fundamentally broke Netscape's alliances with distribution channels. Or look at Southwest Airlines. They didn't fight the massive legacy airlines on their established hub-and-spoke model.
They flew point to point.
Exactly. They frustrated that plan entirely, structurally changing the rules of the game so the legacy airline size actually became a disadvantage.
But wait, how do you know which alliances to break or which plans to frustrate? That requires a massive amount of internal and external data, right?
Yes, which leads to the most famous quote of the entire book found at the end of this chapter. Know the enemy and know yourself, and you can fight 100 battles with no danger of defeat.
Let's look at the mechanism of that quote using Netflix and Blockbuster. Netflix understood itself. It was a highly adaptable tech company, and it deeply understood its opponent.
Blockbuster wasn't just a video store, right?
No. Mechanistically, it was fatally reliant on late fees for a huge percentage of its revenue. Because Blockbuster was structurally addicted to that revenue, they literally couldn't copy Netflix's subscription model without bankrupting their own retail stores.
Wow, so Netflix didn't just have a better idea.
They weaponized Blockbuster's own financial structure against them. That is knowing your enemy.
That's incredible. Okay, so if we transition into the next grouping of chapters 4, 5, and 6, we move from the economics of preparation to the actual physics of combat.
Right, getting onto the field.
Yeah. Chapter 4 is tactical dispositions. The central idea here is invisibility and invincibility, securing yourself against defeat first, and then waiting for the enemy to make a mistake.
Sun Tzu argues that invincibility lies in the defense, the possibility of victory in the attack.
It's the illusion of effort. You watch some of these great historical maneuvers and they look so passive until the last second.
Like George Washington during the American Revolution.
Exactly. His defensive retreats. He wasn't running away out of cowardice. He was keeping his army alive, maintaining his structural integrity, and waiting for the British supply lines to overextend. He secured himself against defeat first.
And in business, look at Tim Cook taking over Apple from Steve Jobs. He didn't immediately launch a bunch of wild new experimental products to prove himself.
No, he focused on the supply chain.
Right. He built up massive cash reserves and ruthlessly fine-tuned that global supply chain. He made Apple essentially collapse-proof. That impenetrable defense gave them the invincibility to wait for the exact right technological moments to attack.
This raises an important point about how we view competition. Defense is often misconstrued as weakness. Look at Nintendo with the release of the Wii.
Oh, they totally opted out of the graphics war.
Yeah, they realized they couldn't win a direct brute force graphics processing war against Sony's PlayStation or Microsoft's Xbox. So they didn't fight that battle. They attacked a completely different dimension, motion control and casual family gaming.
They secured themselves against defeat by refusing to deploy their resources on the enemy's preferred terms.
I love that concept of refusing the battle. But when you do engage, how do you manage the energy? That's chapter 5, energy. This is all about organizing force and controlling momentum.
Sun Tzu introduces two concepts here. Direct forces, which he calls zheng, and indirect forces, which he calls qi. He uses the metaphor of a round stone rolling down a massive mountain.
So how does that work in practice?
The mechanics of zheng and qi are fascinating. The direct force is what engages the enemy and holds their attention. The indirect force is the unexpected maneuver that actually wins the victory.
Like D-Day.
Perfectly. Think of the Allied invasion of Normandy. The direct force, the zheng, was the massive amphibious landing on the beaches. The indirect force, the qi, was the intricate, months-long deception campaign Operation Fortitude.
Where they made the Germans think they were attacking somewhere else.
Exactly. They made the German High Command firmly believe the real attack was coming further north at Pas de Calais. The direct force held them. The indirect force broke their structural response. The combination creates unstoppable momentum, like that rolling stone.
You see this momentum in technology platforms, too.
Sure.
Think of Facebook's early exponential growth.
Oh, the network effect.
Yeah, the direct force was the platform itself, the clean interface, the photo sharing. But the indirect force, the hidden mechanism of victory, was the network effect.
The psychological pull.
Right, that once your friends, your classmates, your family were on it, the social cost of not joining was just too high. That network effect created a rolling stone of momentum that competitors like MySpace simply couldn't stand in front of.
Which perfectly sets up chapter 6, weak points and strong. If you have momentum, where do you direct it? The central metaphor here is the shape of water.
Water avoids high places and hastens downwards.
Exactly. It avoids what is strong and strikes at what is weak. You must make the enemy move, remain completely unpredictable, and strike precisely where they are unprepared.
Washington crossing the Delaware River on Christmas night for the Battle of Trenton is the ultimate water maneuver.
Because of the holiday.
Yeah, the British and Hessian forces were totally unprepared for a winter offensive during a holiday. They were a strong rock, but Washington flowed like water around their expectations and into their weakest structural point, their relaxed readiness.
Or look at corporate globalization. When eBay tried to enter China, they used their rigid global template.
They were the rock.
Yes.
Yes.
They were a strong, unyielding rock, charging transaction fees just like they did in America. Alibaba acted like water. They flowed around that rock by offering free listings and integrating a chat feature that adapted entirely to local Chinese consumer behavior.
Where building trust is key.
Right. They struck eBay's weak point, which was their corporate inflexibility.
And Amazon is another prime example. They maintained razor-thin margins for years, essentially operating at a loss in their retail sector, just to force competitors to bleed out trying to match their low prices.
Amazon's sheer scale allowed them to turn the concept of profit margins into a weapon. They just flowed right into the weak points of traditional brick-and-mortar stores.
Okay, so we've covered the physics of the fight, but getting your forces to the battlefield introduces a whole new set of problems. Let's group chapters 7 through 11. This section is all about friction, environment, and flexibility.
Chapter 7 is maneuvering. How do you turn the devious into the direct?
Right. Sun Tzu warns heavily about the immense dangers of communication delays and moving an army without its baggage train or supplies.
Yes, the friction of movement. He explicitly warns that if you force march your troops 30 miles to gain a tactical advantage, your troops will arrive exhausted, you'll lose your leaders, and only a fraction of your force will actually be combat ready.
It's a logistical nightmare.
You can look at Hannibal crossing the Alps to surprise Rome, or Napoleon's Ulm campaign. The sheer complexity of moving thousands of men, feeding them, and keeping them organized is terrifying.
I always compare this to poor corporate communication. If your marketing department is sprinting 30 miles ahead, promising features to the public, but your product development team is bogged down and miles behind with the actual software, your army is fundamentally disconnected.
The maneuver fails because the logistics of communication broke down.
Exactly. And amidst the chaos of maneuvering, the leader's composure dictates the outcome. Think of Captain Sully landing U.S. Airways Flight 1549 on the Hudson River.
Oh, that's a brilliant modern example.
Right. In the ultimate moment of chaos, friction, and systemic failure, his absolute discipline, deep structural knowledge of the aircraft, and calm communication turned a disastrous situation into a direct, life-saving maneuver. He didn't fight the friction, he managed it.
Which requires immense flexibility, leading us to Chapter 8, Variation of Tactics. The core lesson is that rigidity is death, flexibility is survival.
And here, Sun Tzu lists the 5 dangerous faults of a leader: recklessness, cowardice, a quick temper, and oversensitivity to honor, and excessive compassion.
These are profound psychological vulnerabilities.
Oh.
Let's break down the mechanics.
Sure.
A reckless leader will rush into a trap and get their army destroyed. A cowardly leader will hesitate when decisive action is needed and be captured.
What about the temper?
A quick-tempered leader can be easily provoked by minor insults into making irrational strategic choices. A leader overly sensitive to honor can be manipulated by shame. And a leader with excessive compassion might hesitate to make the hard, necessarily painful choices in the short term, leading to far greater suffering and total defeat in the long term.
That makes a lot of sense. You know, the Maginot Line in World War II perfectly shows the danger of structural rigidity and a failure to vary tactics. France built this massive, static, impenetrable fortification along their border.
They assumed war would look exactly like World War I.
Exactly. And Germany simply varied their tactics and went around it through the Ardennes forest, rendering a multi-billion-dollar defense system completely useless.
In the corporate world, Nokia's collapse was a failure to vary tactics. They were rigidly attached to their own operating system and hardware-first designs, while the entire mobile industry shifted to touchscreens and app-based ecosystems.
And Kodak suffered from that cowardice Sun Tzu mentions. They were too afraid to disrupt their own highly profitable film sales to push the digital camera they had already invented.
Moving to Chapter 9, The Army on the March. This chapter is about reading the signs of the environment and positioning yourself correctly.
Sun Tzu gives very specific advice on reading natural signs, right? Like dust clouds indicating chariots, birds taking flight indicating an ambush in the woods, just to divine the enemy's intentions without emotion.
He also emphasizes taking the high ground.
High ground is everything. Look at the Union forces at the Battle of Gettysburg. Holding Cemetery Ridge gave them the decisive artillery and defensive advantage that turned the tide of the American Civil War.
But reading signs isn't just about dust clouds anymore. It's about reading market signals.
Like Michael Burry.
Exactly. The investor who spotted the 2008 housing bubble before anyone else. He was reading the natural signs of the financial markets. The rising rate of subprime mortgage defaults buried deep in those tranches, without the emotion, greed, or institutional momentum that blinded the rest of Wall Street.
He positioned his portfolio on the high ground while everyone else marched straight into an economic swamp.
Chapter 10 focuses specifically on terrain. Understanding the physical structural environment, Sun Tzu categorizes 6 kinds of terrain.
Accessible, entangling, temporizing, narrow passes, precipitous heights, and positions at a great distance.
Right, but he also lists 6 calamities of an army, which he explicitly notes are faults of the general, not natural disasters: flight, insubordination, collapse, ruin, disorganization, and rout.
To prevent these, he emphasizes treating your soldiers like your own beloved children, which is a wild contrast in the text. I mean, you have the beheading of the concubines, but then you have this deep empathy.
There's a story in our sources about the famous General Wu Qi. He shared every hardship with his men. He wore the same clothes, ate the same rations, and marched on foot.
And what happened with the soldier?
One of his soldiers developed a severe infected abscess, and Wu Qi personally knelt down and sucked the poison out of it.
Wow.
Yeah. The soldier's mother cried when she heard the news, not out of joy, but because she knew the psychological mechanism at play. Her son would now fight to the absolute death for this general, just as his father had done before him. That is how you secure absolute, unbreakable loyalty.
But that compassion must be balanced with structural strictness, right? The text also tells of Lu Meng, a general who executed one of his own loyal compatriots simply for taking a civilian's bamboo hat to protect his armor from the rain.
Lu Meng wept as he ordered the execution, showing his compassion. But the strictness of enforcing the law filled the army with such awe that from then on, items dropped in the street by civilians were left completely untouched by the soldiers.
It's the precise balance of extreme compassion and extreme accountability. Okay, chapter 11 is where things get psychologically intense. The 9 situations. This explores the psychological states of an army based purely on their geographical location.
He talks about dispersive ground, facile ground, contentious ground. But the most famous is desperate ground.
Yes. Desperate ground is territory on which you can only be saved from destruction by fighting without delay.
Sun Tzu advises deliberately throwing your soldiers into desperate ground, because when faced with absolute, unavoidable destruction, human beings lose all fear and fight with superhuman strength and unified purpose.
The sources mention the legendary general Han Xin. He deliberately positioned his army with a deep river directly at their backs. They literally had nowhere to run.
They had to fight for their lives.
And because of that forced desperation, they annihilated a superior enemy force. He also sent a small, fast cavalry force with red flags to tear down the enemy's banners and replace them while the enemy was engaged, causing massive psychological panic in the enemy camp.
A brilliant dual maneuver.
Oh wait, let me push back on this concept of desperate ground for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
If I take this into a modern context, creating desperate ground sounds like a recipe for a horribly toxic workplace, like a manager artificially creating hyper-stressful, impossible deadlines just to squeeze productivity out of a burned-out team. Isn't that just bad management?
That is an excellent point, and the distinction between genuine stakes and artificial manipulation is crucial here. Sun Tzu is absolutely not advocating for artificial abuse or creating fake emergencies to fuel a manager's ego.
So how does it actually apply?
The mechanism of desperate ground only works if the stakes are real and shared. There is a massive difference between a toxic boss and a startup team with only 3 months of financial runway left.
Oh, I see.
In the startup scenario, the founders and the team are truly on desperate ground. If they don't launch the product and secure funding, the company dies, and everyone loses their jobs. That shared existential reality, honestly communicated, can bond a team and produce incredible, fearless innovation.
But artificially manipulating people into a state of constant panic when the stakes aren't real.
That will only lead to rapid burnout, resentment, and the total collapse of the organization.
That makes total sense. The stakes have to be structurally real, not artificially imposed. Moving on to the final grouping, chapters 12 and 13, which deal with chaos and information. Chapter 12 is the attack by fire.
This is about using highly disruptive elements to cause systemic chaos, and knowing exactly when to exploit that chaos.
Because fire is the ultimate disruptive, uncontrollable force.
Right. The text recounts Pan Chao's legendary nighttime fire attack on a camp of barbarian envoys.
Yeah.
He was vastly outnumbered, but he understood the psychological multiplier of fire.
He used the quote, "Nothing venture, nothing win."
Or, as the Chinese proverb goes, you can't catch tiger cubs without entering the tiger's lair. He used the wind and the uncontrollable chaos of a night fire to completely paralyze a superior force, exterminating them and securing an entire kingdom's loyalty in one stroke.
But I noticed this chapter also contains one of the most sobering, reflective warnings in the whole book. Sun Tzu steps back from the tactics and says, never put troops in the field to gratify your own ego, and never fight a battle simply out of spite or anger.
Because anger can change to gladness in a few days. But a destroyed kingdom or a bankrupted business can never be brought back to life.
It is a profound appeal for rationality over emotion. The destruction of capital, human or financial, is permanent. And finally, chapter 13, the use of spies.
This chapter underscores the absolute necessity of foreknowledge. You cannot predict the future through spirits, ghosts, or deductive logic. You need actual granular information from other human beings.
He lists 5 classes of spies: local, inward, converted, doomed, and surviving.
The ultimate historical example of this mechanism is the codebreakers of Enigma in World War II, cracking the German naval communications at Bletchley Park.
That foreknowledge saved millions of lives because the Allies knew where the U-boats were before they struck. But if we look at today, data is the modern spy.
Oh, absolutely.
Companies that harvest vast amounts of user data, like Netflix's algorithms, knowing exactly what shows you watch, when you pause, what genres you skip, they have structural foreknowledge of what the market wants. They are ensuring victory before the million-dollar pilot episode is even officially greenlit.
So having walked through the specific mechanisms of all 13 chapters, we synthesize the entire text. Several overarching major strategic principles emerge that repeat like a drumbeat.
Right. First, know yourself and your opponent. It's the ultimate reality check. It's the mathematics of victory. If you don't know your own weaknesses, you will deploy your strengths incorrectly.
Second, win without fighting. That remains the highest, most elegant form of victory. The destruction of resources should always be the last resort.
Third, speed and timing. Momentum and precise timing will beat raw, sluggish size every single time. It's the rolling stone.
Fourth, flexibility and adaptability. The metaphor of water. The terrain changes, the macroeconomic environment changes, your enemy changes. If you remain rigid, you die.
And fifth, choosing the right battlefield. Don't fight where they are strong. Force the enemy to play your game on your terms in a space where their advantages actually become liabilities.
What's truly fascinating here is that when you strip away the chariots, the halberds, and the ancient terminology, all these physical maneuvers are actually just tools to manipulate human psychology.
The human mind is the real battlefield for Sun Tzu.
Oh, absolutely. Let's dig deep into that psychology. It's entirely about how people react under pressure. It's the battle between fear and structure.
You know, earlier I was reading about the Roman testudo formation, that turtle shell of interlocking shields the legions used.
Right.
When facing a barrage of arrows, the natural human psychological reaction is pure panic and fear. But that physical structure of the shields provided a psychological anchor that beat the fear. Sun Tzu's methods provide that exact same psychological structure.
Exactly. And consider the mechanism of how information creates power, while uncertainty creates panic. Sun Tzu's entire focus on deception, spies, and unorthodoxy is designed to inject paralyzing uncertainty into the enemy commander's mind.
When you don't know where the attack is coming from, your mind just races.
You try to defend every possible point,
Yeah.
you over-prepare everywhere, and you become physically and mentally exhausted before the actual battle even starts. You defeat yourself through anxiety.
And expectations heavily influence decisions. Overconfidence causes a totally blinding effect. Think about the boxing match between Mike Tyson and Buster Douglas in 1990.
Oh, Tyson was viewed globally as this invincible, terrifying force.
The expectation of a first-round knockout was absolute. That expectation created an overconfidence blindness in Tyson's camp. They didn't even bring proper equipment to treat swelling.
Wait, really? No equipment?
None. And Douglas, who was massively grieving his mother's recent death but incredibly focused, used that psychological gap, that lack of preparation, to pull off the biggest upset in boxing history.
Furthermore, the psychological shock of sudden momentum is devastating. Why did Germany's Blitzkrieg work so effectively at the start of WWII?
Because it was so fast.
It wasn't just the physical destruction of tanks and planes. The rapid, non-stop, unpredictable execution literally broke the psychological will of the opposing commanders to fight, long before their actual physical capacity to fight was fully depleted. They felt defeated in their minds first, so their physical structures collapsed.
Okay, so if the mind is the real battlefield, what does this all mean for us today, practically speaking? Let's pivot explicitly to the modern corporate arena, because you don't need an army to apply this. How do we engage in ethical warfare in the market using these psychological mechanisms?
Let's look at competition and market positioning. In the 1990s, AMD was creating computer processors that were arguably as good as, if not sometimes better than, Intel's.
Right.
But Intel launched the Intel Inside marketing campaign. They bypassed the computer manufacturers entirely and marketed directly to the consumer psychology.
Creating a perception?
Exactly. They created a perception that a computer wasn't reliable or fast unless it had an Intel Inside sticker on the box. It was a brilliant psychological market positioning that won the war without fighting a purely technical battle over processor speeds. They fought in the mind of the consumer.
And risk management. Look at Warren Buffett's behavior during the 2008 financial crisis. While everyone else on Wall Street was highly leveraged, overextended, and ultimately panicking, Buffett was sitting on a mountain of cash.
Just waiting.
Patiently waiting for the market to fall onto what Sun Tzu calls facile ground, where assets are cheap, easily accessible, and everyone is desperate to sell. Then he struck. investing billions in companies like Goldman Sachs and GE on incredibly favorable terms. He prepared his defenses and waited for the environment to provide the victory.
You see this constantly in entrepreneurship too. Startups use the small force, big impact model all the time. SpaceX didn't try to outbuild NASA's massive legacy infrastructure all at once.
That would have been impossible.
Right. They focused obsessively on one weak point in the aerospace industry: the exorbitant cost of disposable rockets. By mastering reusable rockets, they absorbed years of explosive failures, not as defeats, but as necessary data collection, essentially energy management.
They eventually created a completely dominant position in the market. But we must clearly distinguish here. Ethical competitive strategy is about efficiency, better market positioning, and deeply understanding consumer data.
Unethical manipulation, fraud, corporate sabotage, stealing trade secrets might win a short-term battle, but as Sun Tzu explicitly warns, it destroys the moral law of the organization and ultimately ruins the kingdom.
That's a vital distinction. Let's talk about the person actually leading the charge. What makes a Sun Tzu leader in today's world?
A commander's character is defined by their decision-making process and their ability to stay calm and structured in crises. We saw a powerful example of this with Jacinda Ardern, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, during the Christchurch terror attacks and the early days of the global pandemic.
Her communication style was incredibly composed, deeply empathetic, yet immediately decisive.
The mechanism there is that a leader's calmness acts as a structural container for the public's fear. She structured the chaotic energy of a panicked nation into cohesive action.
Yes. If the leader shouts, panics, and paces around, the chaos amplifies throughout the whole team like a contagion. But if the leader is composed, the energy is structured. The leader's self-control is their ultimate weapon. It unites the team's morale because they have a stable anchor point.
Now, it's important to realize that this philosophy isn't just for CEOs or prime ministers. This applies directly to our everyday personal lives.
Totally. Think about negotiations or difficult personal conversations. You have to enter them without anger. If you go into a high-stakes salary negotiation with your boss or a deep conflict with your partner and you are angry, you are immediately committing one of the 5 dangerous faults.
You have a hasty temper that can be provoked.
You become predictable. You have to manage your own psychology and structure your own emotions first before you can manage the negotiation.
And in time management and personal goals. Sun Tzu's principle of concentrating force is vital here. Many people spread their daily energy across 10 different hobbies, side hustles, and social obligations, and as a result, they make zero progress in any of them.
If you focus your time and capital on one major life goal at a time, your impact becomes exponential.
And what about conflict resolution? There's a beautiful counterintuitive line in the text. When you surround an army, leave an outlet free. Do not press a desperate foe too hard.
It's the concept of leaving the golden bridge for your enemy to retreat across.
Exactly. Let's look at the psychology of that.
If you are in a massive argument with someone and you have completely proven them wrong with facts and logic, do not back them into a corner where their only option is to lash out in humiliation.
Ethically allow them to save face.
Give them a dignified way to say, okay, I see your point, or I misunderstood. Give them a golden bridge. Otherwise, you trigger that desperate ground mentality, and they will fight you to the bitter end out of sheer desperate ego, destroying the relationship entirely.
To solidify all of these mechanisms, let's look at 2 standout historical moments mentioned in our sources that perfectly encapsulate this entire philosophy in action. First, the story of Kui and the Duke of Qi.
Oh, this is a great one.
Kui's state had been defeated 3 separate times in pitched, bloody battles by the superior forces of the Duke of Qi. They were utterly beaten and were about to sign a humiliating treaty surrendering massive portions of their land.
But during the formal signing ceremony,
Kui suddenly drew a hidden dagger and seized the Duke right on the altar step.
this unbelievable boldness.
Completely unexpected. He held the dagger to the Duke's chest and demanded the immediate return of all the conquered lands. The Duke, suddenly, in peril of his life, agreed. Kui threw the dagger down and calmly went back to his seat, as if nothing had happened.
Duke must have been furious.
Furious. He wanted to back out later, but his advisors told him that breaking his word after such a highly public event would destroy his political standing and the moral law of his rule. So, with one completely unexpected, highly leveraged asymmetrical move, Kui undid the massive losses of 3 military defeats.
It's the ultimate example of striking where the enemy is completely unprepared. The Duke was psychologically prepared for a peaceful treaty signing. His defenses were down. He was not prepared for a hostage situation on the altar.
And the second story is Wang Chen versus the state of Chu. Wang Chen invaded Chu territory, but instead of advancing, he halted and absolutely refused to fight. He stayed securely behind his fortified walls.
The Chu army marched up and tried to provoke him every single day, shouting insults, but he just ignored them.
The mechanism here is brilliant. Instead of fighting, Wang Chen focused entirely on the internal state of his own men. He shared his meals with them, made sure they were incredibly well fed, and let them play sports and games in the camp.
He essentially built a loyal, homogeneous, highly energized body of troops whose morale was just peaking.
Meanwhile, the Chu army, standing outside the walls, grew increasingly frustrated, bored, and exhausted by waiting. Their energy was depleting. Finally, they gave up and marched away in absolute disgust.
And that is the exact moment Wang Chen struck. He pursued their retreating, disorganized, and demoralized army and completely slaughtered them, conquering the entire state. It perfectly demonstrates the power of patience, energy management, and morale over raw, mindless aggression.
Now, before we extract our final lessons, we critically need to clarify some common misunderstandings. Because the art of war is frequently quoted by people, often toxic managers, trying to justify terrible manipulative behavior.
Yes, let's aggressively debunk the myths. This book is not a manual for aggression, and it is not a guidebook for being a ruthless corporate sociopath.
Far from it. Throughout the text, Sun Tzu displays a profound, almost heavy respect for the true cost of conflict. He constantly reminds the reader of the immense financial drain on the state and the tragic human suffering war causes.
He explicitly warns that no ruler should ever fight out of ego or pique, and no general should fight out of spite.
It is fundamentally a manual for avoiding destruction whenever humanly possible.
Okay, we are going to distill this massive text into 20 rapid-fire but deeply actionable lessons for you, the listener. We've pulled the ultimate takeaways directly from the sources. We'll give you the principle, explain the mechanism of why it matters, and give you a practical application. Let's go.
Sound good.
Number 1, victorious warriors win first, then go to war.
The principle here is that preparation is everything. Mechanistically, victory is decided by the structural groundwork laid before the conflict begins.
So practically, in business, don't launch a product or pitch a massive idea until you've already quietly secured the internal alliances, gathered the data, and tested the market. You should know the answer before you ask the question.
Right. 2. The worst strategy is besieging walled cities.
Direct attacks on an opponent's absolute core strength are incredibly wasteful and usually end in failure. If you're a small startup, don't try to outspend a massive entrenched corporation on traditional Super Bowl TV ads. You will lose.
Find a guerrilla marketing channel or a niche demographic they are completely ignoring and attack there. 3. All warfare is based on deception.
Human beings make decisions based on perception, not objective reality. Therefore, controlling perception is controlling reality.
In negotiations, never reveal your absolute bottom line or your tightest deadlines right away. Control the information flow to keep the other party uncertain. 4. Prolonged war destroys the victor.
Speed is crucial because friction and time degrade resources. If you enter a nasty legal dispute or a highly toxic workplace dynamic, resolve it, settle it, or exit quickly. Dragging it out of stubborn pride will drain your mental health, your reputation, and your finances.
5. Forage on the enemy.
Why spend your own capital when you can leverage your competitors? If an established company has spent millions training a workforce in a specific, highly technical skill, recruit aggressively from that talent pool rather than spending years training novices from scratch.
6. Know yourself and your enemy.
This is the ultimate formula for invincibility. Do a brutally honest, objective SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. But crucially, do it not just on your rivals, but on yourself. You must know where your own armor is thin.
7. Do not repeat the tactics that won you one victory.
Adaptability is key because environments are dynamic. The mechanism that worked yesterday might be obsolete today. What got you a promotion in your last role, say being a lone wolf top performer, might get you fired in your new role as a manager where collaboration is required. Circumstances change.
8. Water has no constant shape.
Avoid rigidity at all costs. When a macro-level crisis like a global pandemic hits, the restaurants that rigidly wait for the dining room to reopen go bankrupt. The ones that immediately act like water, shifting to delivery, ghost kitchens, and meal kits survive.
9. To secure ourselves against defeat lies in our own hands.
Focus entirely on internal preparation before worrying about external threats. You cannot control the macroeconomic climate, but you can control your personal emergency savings, the diversification of your investments, and the continual development of your skills.
10. Let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night.
Secrecy has immense strategic value because it prevents the enemy from preparing defenses. Don't broadcast your next big career move or business pivot on social media for validation before you've actually executed it. Move in silence.
11. Energy is like the bending of a crossbow. Decision is the release.
Timing is the multiplier of force. Build up your skills, your network, your capital patiently over years. That's the drawing of the bow. And then, when the perfect asymmetric opportunity arises, pull the trigger instantly and with total commitment.
12. Mask strength with weakness to lure the enemy.
Ego demands that we show off how smart or powerful we are. Strategy demands the opposite. If you are the smartest person in the room during a negotiation, sometimes it pays to play a little dumb, ask basic questions, and see what the other side arrogantly reveals to you.
13. Attack where the enemy is unprepared.
In business strategy, this is finding the blue ocean. Don't fight in the bloody red ocean of hyper-competition. Look for the market segment, the specific demographic, or the consumer problem that all your competitors are completely ignoring, and monopolize it.
14. An army without a baggage train is lost.
Logistics and supply chain dictate the limits of your strategy. You can have the most brilliant, viral app idea in the world, but if you haven't paid for sufficient server space and your app crashes on day one, your brilliant idea fails. Logistics precede victory.
15. Do not press a desperate foe too hard.
Always leave a way out. In personal conflicts, allow the other person to apologize without rubbing their face in their mistake. If you humiliate them, you turn a defeated opponent into a lifelong, desperate enemy.
16. The general who does not seek personal fame is the jewel of the kingdom.
True leadership is about the success of the mission, not the inflation of the ego. Managers who actively share credit with their team and take the blame for failures inspire far more fierce, enduring loyalty than those who hog the spotlight.
17. Look upon your soldiers as beloved sons.
Empathy is not weakness. It is a profound strategic asset. Leaders who genuinely care about the psychological and physical well-being of their employees get extraordinary discretionary performance in return when a crisis hits.
18. Put troops in desperate situations and they will survive.
The human survival instinct is incredibly powerful. Sometimes, quitting your comfortable but dead-end job with no backup plan is the exact existential pressure you need to force yourself to finally launch your dream business. Comfort breeds stagnation.
19. Move only when there is an advantage.
Frenetic activity does not equal strategic progress. It is perfectly fine to sit still, hold your resources, and do nothing if the market conditions are terrible and the odds are against you. Patience is a maneuver.
And 20. Foreknowledge is the reason for divine manipulation of the threads.
Data is ultimate power. Never make a major strategic decision based on a gut feeling or emotion if you have the ability to gather actual empirical data and intelligence first. Information precedes action.
Incredible list.
Now, as we near the end of our time, let's take a closer look at the 3 most famous sound bites from the book and unpack the deep mechanics of what they actually mean. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles.
We touched on this earlier, but fundamentally, it's an equation of risk management. It removes the mysticism and mystery from success.
How so?
It says that victory isn't magic. It is the mathematical byproduct of profound, objective self-awareness combined with deep environmental awareness. Ignorance is the only true danger.
Then there is the ultimate mic drop. Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting.
This quote challenges our most basic primate instinct to meet physical force with physical force. It demands that we elevate our thinking above mere brawling to the level of psychological and structural mastery.
Why risk the fiction and destruction of a fight when you can win simply by positioning yourself so overwhelmingly well that the opponent realizes fighting is mathematically futile?
And finally, in the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity.
Chaos scrambles the existing hierarchy. It creates what Sun Tzu calls facile ground for the prepared mind. When the rules break down, the massive institutions that relied on the old rules panic and freeze.
But the adaptable, fluid strategist looks at that chaos and sees a blank canvas where new empires can be built rapidly.
Okay, let's play devil's advocate here for a minute as we close. No book is perfect, not even one that has lasted 2,500 years and influenced everyone from generals to CEOs. Let's look at the critical analysis. What are the flaws?
Well, the strengths are obvious. Timeless psychological insights, a perfect distillation of the economy of conflict, and a brilliant advocacy for rationality. But there are significant limitations when applying it today. The most glaring is that the text assumes the absolute, unquestioned life or death authority of the general. I mean, we started the show with him literally executing people who laughed at his orders.
Yeah, that wouldn't fly today.
In a modern democratic society, or a highly collaborative creative business environment, that kind of rigid, unquestionable authoritarianism is not just illegal, it's highly toxic and counterproductive.
Right, you can't run a modern tech startup or a marketing agency like an ancient military dictatorship. Modern innovation requires psychological safety, the ability to question leadership, and the freedom to propose wild new ideas without fear of being metaphorically beheaded.
Exactly. Furthermore, Sun Tzu relies heavily on deception, spies, and manipulation. He calls it intuitive sagacity.
But if you apply that philosophy to literally in business or your personal life, you can easily breed a culture of deep paranoia, distrust, and Machiavellian manipulation that will ultimately rot the organization or your marriage from the inside out.
You definitely can't build a healthy relationship or a great corporate culture if you are constantly treating everyone around you like a potential spy or a target for deception. The wisdom has to be adapted.
Precisely. The wisdom of the art of war must be adapted to the modern context of cooperation and ethical competition, not just zero-sum destruction. As we wrap up this massive deep dive, I want you, the listener, to think about the biggest obstacle you're facing in your life right now. Maybe it's a difficult boss, a failing project, a stalled career, or a deep personal conflict.
Are you trying to smash your head through a brick wall out of sheer ego? Are you treating every single interaction like a brutal arm wrestling match?
Or are you willing to flow like water around the obstacle? Ask yourself, what if your biggest weakness right now isn't a lack of strength or a lack of financial resources, but simply a lack of patience, a lack of preparation, and a lack of objective observation?
Are you willing to execute your emotional attachments to bad strategies, just like Sun Tzu executed those commanders in order to achieve the flawless execution you actually want in your life?
We hope this deep dive into the ancient science of strategy gives you the tools to step back, read the terrain, and win your battles before they even begin. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Keep questioning, keep adapting, and keep diving deep.